think it's time to talk about camera basics and what this is all about. Exposure. But before that, if you like what you see, highly appreciate it. Let's go. Alright, I think we found a nice spot to show you how exposure works and how it is affected by the triangle. Here we have our ISO, our aperture and our shutter speed. As you can see, I've created a small triangle out of them. In the middle I will simply write exposure, because that's what it's all about. And of course light. So I also have those indicators going from bright to less light. I think we can work with that. Let's start with aperture, which is this side of the triangle. As you all know, when you check the camera lens specs, there is always an F number. This is exactly what aperture is measured in. Basically, aperture refers to the opening of the lens that allows light to pass through and hit the sensor. A wider aperture means a lower f-stop number, which can be confusing to be honest, but you will get used to it over time. The lower the number of the f-stop, the more light can enter the camera sensor. But why do we need this? The answer is simple, because of your depth of field, indicated by this arrow right here. The wider your aperture, the more shallow your depth of field will be. If you adjust your camera to a narrower aperture, you will get a deeper depth of field and your background will be more detailed, as you can see in these, let me check them, these two example pictures. One drawback, of course, is that if there is too much light coming in, your shot might be overexposed. This is why you have two more options. The second one is this side, shutter speed. Inside your camera there is a little curtain called the shutter. It is used to be mechanical with physical parts built into your camera, but times have changed and they have invented an electronic shutter that can be handled by software to darken your sensor. It can be much faster than the mechanical one and it is silent. However, my Sony A7 IV has both built in and I use them according to the situation I'm in. But back to shutter speed. This is the second way to control how much light will come into your lens by using this curtain. The faster you set your shutter speed, the more frozen your picture will be and there will be no motion blur. Most of the time this is perfect for photos. If it's too bright outside, set your shutter to a very fast one and your pictures will be sharp as a razor blade. In videography we have an issue with that. There is a 180-degree rule which says that your shutter speed should be double the frame rate you're shooting in. This means that most of the time we are shooting in 24-25 frames per second, so we have to stick to our 1/50 shutter speed, which is not very fast in bright light situations. Of course you can crank it up to a faster one, but this will affect the style of your video, or in worst case you will get jerky videos. So if you want to record your videos in bright light, you could also go with a narrow aperture and push it to the f22 limit or so, but then you will lose the shallow depth of field we all want. So yeah, not the best way to do it. But there is also a solution for that. But before I get into this topic, let's quickly jump to our third and last tool for handling exposure, ISO. I've already created a detailed low light ISO video for you in which I visited the Dragon Caves in Mallorca. Check it out here in the upper corner, it's very informative and the trip was stunning. So here is a quick recap about ISO. The ISO value on your camera refers to the sensitivity of the camera sensor to light. A higher ISO makes it more sensitive to light and results in a brighter image, while a lower ISO results in a darker image. Perfect for low light situations, you say? I agree, but be careful, the higher you go with your ISO, the more grain and noise will appear in your pictures. Let me show you some examples here. Yes, those two. You can see here, this is very grainy. This depends for sure on your camera sensor and its low light capabilities, as well as your sensor size and technology behind it. And one more thing to mention is that a high megapixel count is not necessarily better for low light, especially for video. Most low light video cameras like the Sony A7IV have only 12.1 megapixels. Alright, cool, I would say our little piece of artwork is done. I call it exposure, very creative, right? And let's go on. Alright, now we know about the exposure triangle, but I still owe you an answer. So what do we do if we want to film at 24-25 frames per second following the 180-degree rule. Don't want to give up the blurry background and still want to maintain the cinematic motion blur. The bad news is that there is no way to adjust this in camera anymore, but the good news is that you can compensate it with an external tool, ND filters. ND or neutral density filters are screwed onto the front of your lens, providing sunglasses for your camera and thus reducing the amount of light that enters your lens. So it remains possible for you to film in bright sunlight at ISO 100 with a shutter speed of 1/50 and a wide open aperture such as f1.4. Great, by the way, what I said wasn't entirely accurate. There are cameras that already have the ND filter built in, such as the Sony CV1, but this is more of an exception. For very wide angle lenses you may need to place the filter in an adapter that is screwed between the camera body and the lens, as the lens is too curved for a screw-on filter and thus cannot be used. The disadvantage, of course, is that you need an additional attachment and that depending on the intensity of light, a different filter must be used. That's why there are also variable filters that can be adjusted by rotation. Nevertheless, in run and gun situations it can be cumbersome to constantly adjust the filter, and most filters also introduce color distortion, increasing post-processing effort. Therefore, I personally often use the A mode on my camera, Aperture Priority, in which the camera prioritizes the aperture and adjusts the shutter speed at ISO 100. I prefer to keep the shallow depth of field rather than the motion blur, which only comes into play in certain scenes anyways. But I'm really extremely curious about how you handle it. In many camera-related YouTube channels, not much is actually said about this, which is why I'm even more interested in hearing your thoughts. Do you do everything manually or adjust your ND filters? Or do you sometimes choose the Aperture Priority mode to avoid missing a shot? Let me know in the comments and let's discuss it. I would really be happy to. Before I end this video, I also want to give you a tip because I get asked this question a lot. How do I correctly expose an image so that it looks good? This is hard to answer because the exposure of an image depends on everybody's personal taste. Without any more extensive explanation, I have found that with no profile picture it works best to overexpose by plus 0.3 and plus 0.7 and then check your display with your eyes. At least this works for me on my Sony A7 IV. Set the zebra settings at 68 ±1 and activate the histogram for cross checks. Simply watch out that the values are most in the middle of the diagram. If you want to know more extensively about exposing your picture the right way, please let me know in the comments down below so that I can plan a video about this topic as well. Alright, I think that's it. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to my channel, give the video a thumbs up and turn on the bell so you don't miss any future video from me. Thank you for tuning in and staying until the end. It really means a lot to me. If you haven't seen my other videos yet, I'm now going to show you another one of mine here so you can keep watching. See you next time.